So have we got any apologies?
None, Chair.
Great, so let's move on to the minutes. So we've got minutes from the 7th February meeting. Does anyone have anything to flag?
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh, I didn't run through my preamble, did I? Is that what you're looking at me? Okay, perfect. So as we might know by now, this meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. In-person attendees are required to wear masks on entry to the building and meeting room, but may remove them when seated. If members and officers could please remember to switch their microphone on when speaking and off when they have finished speaking in the council chamber to ensure the microphone is positioned near you and speak directly into the microphone. That was a bit of a mouthful. And please switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode. If you need to take a call, please leave the room. Perfect. Right, disclosures of interest. Fabulous. No disclosure of interest. So we're on to urgent business. And the only urgent business is that item number 8, which is the consideration counter-argument, which is down as to follow, will now be presented at the next meeting on the 23rd of May. And we are on to the reports. So it's waste disposal and material markets, which is over to Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Having read through the report and also watched the video, it seems to me that a number of questions are likely to arise that affect both of those things. I just thought it might be easier for everyone if we saw the video first, but I'm not hung up on it, but it's just a suggestion.
Happy to take the video first if you're ready with it. Perfect. Let's go to the video then.
All vehicles delivering waste to Greatmore are weighed on entry. A variety of vehicles deliver waste to Greatmore. The branded articulated lorries deliver the waste from the High Heavens Waste Transfer Station. Household waste from the 3 districts in the south of Buckinghamshire is delivered to High Heavens and loaded into these larger vehicles to maximise transport efficiencies. Household and commercial waste from Aylesbury Vale, the district where Greatmore is situated, is delivered directly by local authority waste collection vehicles. Greatmore also receives waste from other sources, including some which is delivered by train. All vehicles are weighed on leaving Greatmore, telling us the weight of waste we have received. Once in the bunker, the waste is manipulated by the grab cranes. An average load for the grabs is 6 tons. That's the weight of an adult African elephant. The grabs do 3 key jobs. They are used to dig a trench below the tipping hall doors to allow for more waste to be delivered. They stack the waste on one side of the bunker, and last but not least, they load the hopper that feeds the grate. A load is dropped into the hopper approximately every 10 minutes. The crane operatives keep a close eye on the waste deliveries to ensure that no large items of non-compliant waste are delivered. It takes approximately 2 hours for full combustion of the waste in the grate at an absolute minimum temperature of 850 degrees Celsius. Greatmore is the largest single grate facility in the country, handling approximately 900 tons of waste every day. The moving grate keeps the waste flowing and the ash drops into an underground water bath, where it is cooled before collection by the IBA conveyor. The conveyor removes the bottom ash from the water bath. This ash is passed on for use as an aggregate in road building. The ash also contains ferrous metals, which are removed by a physical barrier and also by electromagnet. They are subsequently taken for recycling. The weight of the bottom ash and metal corresponds to around 15 to 20% of the weight of the waste treated. Hot flue gases rising from the grate heat water in boiler tubes located in the boiler walls. The steam created in the boiler is pressurized to 50 bars. This superheated steam at 400 degrees C is fed through to the turbine. At Greatmore, 126 tons of steam are generated each hour. The turbine, powered by superheated steam from the boiler, rotates at around 4,800 RPM. The gearbox slows this speed of revolution down, enabling the generator to convert this energy into electricity. From here, it is fed to a transformer and then out to the national grid. At Greatmore, we output 26 megawatts, enough to power 40,000 homes, which is equivalent to 18% of the households of Buckinghamshire. After powering the turbine, the utilised steam passes through to the air-cooled condenser. 4 huge condenser fans create an updraft of cold air. Above them, narrow pipes contain the steam, and the flow of air condenses the steam back to water, and it is recirculated back to the boiler to begin the process again. Greatmore is capable of using steam to heat surrounding buildings or residential developments. However, due to its rural location, there are currently no users nearby. The operations team's role is to oversee all aspects of the process at Greatmore from the control room. From the waste being stored in the bunker and the combustion in the grate, to the flue gas treatment system and electricity generation, the operations team operates 24 hours a day. After heating the water in the boiler, the flue gases are cleaned. First of all, the hot flue gas is treated with ammonia, and the boiler ash is removed by a pneumatic wrapping system. The flue gases are then chemically treated in the reactor, where toxins are removed. Treatment with lime, ammonia, and activated carbon creates the air pollution control residue, a powder which can be collected. There are approximately 3,000 6-meter-long baghouse filter tubes, which collect the control residue, which is then removed off-site before further treatment. The cleaned gases are continuously monitored and recorded to ensure emissions remain within the limits set in the environmental permit. The emissions levels from Greatmore are available on a monthly basis on the Greatmore emissions page. After treatment, the cleaned flue gas, which is over 99% water vapor at 160 degrees C, is released through the 94-meter-high stack.
Great. Do we have any questions on the video first off?
I don't, Chair, at this stage. I was sort of hoping to combine
Bring
it
them
with the
after.
report, if you see.
Perfect. Shall we move on to the report from Sean?
Thank you, Chair. What we've done in this report, similar to the previous one, we've tried to answer all the questions that the various group members raised. And in particular, I think they had some questions about the material destinations, some clarifications. So we've put that in Appendix 1. And then there was some specific queries about the waste oil off-takers, and that's in Appendix 2. Appendix 3 was a slightly more focused question about the plastics for the battery off-takers, and hence the additional sheet showing the process flow, but that primarily talks about the environmental management plan for the facility. Appendix 4 is the glass reprocessor details, and Appendix 5 is, we thought it was worthwhile putting in just St Albans sort of recycling leaflet, because members spent a bit of time talking about it. We have copies of all of our leaflets, which we can distribute to members just for information. We brought a few here. A lot of those are constantly updated. We work with people like RAP, Keep Britain Tidy, as well as our own internal collection and comms teams to constantly update them. So, for example, this year, a lot of the focus from people like RAP is on food waste and wasted food. So we will be modifying some of our campaign leaflets, and you've probably seen the sides of the dust carts regularly have messages on them. In particular, the focus nationally is trying to link things like wasted food, waste prevention to carbon and climate, and you know how much carbon's in your average bin versus the recycling and what you can save. And then the next two appendices are the video you're seeing and the link to the emissions report, which is a public document for Great Moor and any waste facility. So that's all registered with the EA, and a lot of that is real time. The recording is a few hours old, because that's the way the EA does their reporting. So what they have is a lot of live and continuous reporting mechanisms at all waste facilities, and increasingly they're using drones and other factors to check on them. We've also put in an answer to Councillor Wynn's queries about the historical landfill in Wigmore, as well as a link to the Environment Agency. Again, real-time monitoring, all the monitoring reports on there. They're usually very long, lengthy documents, but all the data's there, and if you've got any queries, please come back to us, and we'll do our best to sort of break it down into sort of plain English. And then we've done a bit of a list of some of the Let's Recycle on some of the government reports, which are coming out all the time, as you probably will understand. They're constantly updating things to do with waste, the circular economy, carbon. So they're increasingly getting linked together. So if you've got any questions, fire away.
I'll go over to
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've got a few. I think the first one is the reference to residual waste. I seem to recall that, as far as Luton is concerned, residual waste is just about everything that householders put in their black bin. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, it's anything that's not organic or recycling. So it's just almost a plain English industry term for anything we could call it black bag waste or bin waste. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Before I forget to ask the question, looking at the St Albans system, I thought ours was complicated enough with 4 bins, but they've got 6. There is a theory that I've heard recited that says the more complicated you make it, the less you'll get people to participate with any accuracy and enthusiasm. Is that your view, please?
It is my personal view, and at one time there was another council in the Northwest had 9 separate bins. But what you find with certainly St Albans and others, they do a lot of things called like curbside sort. So the resident splits it up into smaller and smaller fractions like paper and card. That tends to increase the amount of vehicles you have to have going around. And as you say, there does become a bit of sort of apathy because it's yet another bin and people don't have space to store them. Ours is commingled. We all constantly look at whether that's the best system in terms of composition, what's in the waste, you know, if there's anything more we can put out, especially things like food. But yes, I would say, given the average terraced house is 4 meters wide, there's only so much frontage you can put your bins out.
You know, thanks for that. I mean, is there any evidence that making it more complicated actually does reduce participation. I can understand the theory, and I'm inclined to agree with it, but
It's not so much the complication. They tend to be out in areas where there's a lot more. They're not very urban, so they tend to have a lot more and a higher percentage of their recycling is either food waste or garden waste. By just the nature of where they are, most urban authorities will go for a commingled, which, as you say, tries to get participation by making it removing any barriers, making it as simple as possible. So in Luton, the glass is very popular, the garden waste is popular, and then the commingled recycling is again also very popular.
thank you. I mean, I subscribe to the view that if you want people to behave in a particular way, the easier you make it for them to do it, the more likely is they'll comply. Okay, can we move on then to the incineration? And in your paragraph 13 of your report, you say the where are we? The flue gas treatment system removes pollutants. Well, in a report attached to a report that we had some time ago, 7th of February, was a copy of I can find the front page of it, a pollution from waste incineration report that went to the all-party parliamentary group on air pollution, and it contains a couple of, well, more than a couple, several pages of statements from professors of various kinds and doctors of this and doctors of that, saying two things. One, that some of the particulates are so small that they can't be filtered out, and some of the particulates can in fact be harmful if ingested. I just wondered if there's any response to that to reassure us on the flue gases.
Councillor, I mean, that's a really, from us, as more of a general statement. I mean, each facility has its own monitoring requirements and monitoring permit. So I would have to go back and sort of try and find out about any particular facilities you were concerned about. The All Parliamentary Group is a very good group, but it is looking at the rounder picture, old plants, new plants, you know, across some of them are 20, 30 years old. So I can look it up and come back to you with any requirements you want.
I mean, the report itself is dated December last year, so it's not very old, but I accept it may have been looking at plants which have been in operation for a long time. I mean, do we not have any representatives from the operators of the incineration plant present that could give us some clues?
We have John Melling, who's the FCC Luton Contracts Manager, present. His focus is very much on the Luton contract, but he can probably give some generalised comments on EFWs, particularly in the FCC market.
Good evening, Chair, councillors. So my expertise is not on the EFW side of it, of the operation. I am on the treatment of the recycling that goes through the contract that we have. That being said, I am taking down any questions that you have for the EFW team, so I can raise it to those tomorrow morning and hopefully get your questions answered as fast as possible. I've got some working knowledge of the EFW site, but not that I could go into that greater detail with that much accuracy that you'd be able to rely.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I suggest that you might want to feed Sean with some more detail responses, which he can then pass on to us at the next meeting, if that's okay. But moving on then, the next paragraph of Sean's report says, hazardous materials are sent for final disposal in a specialist landfill site. Well, what kind of hazardous materials? And what's the effect of putting them in a landfill site, even if it is a specialist one?
Yes, the materials are a small percentage of what is captured up the flue, but they go to similar landfill sites to the ones where we sent asbestos and some of the more difficult materials which we collect. Any council collects as part of its normal duties as classed as hazardous waste. So they're fairly small specialist landfill sites which are in what's called a closed cell. So they're not open for months and months at a time. What they are is particularly look at the chemistry of what comes in. So there's no mixing, there's no unfortunate sort of occurrences, and they're consigned to the landfill sites with the EA's permission and agreement by specialist contractors, hauliers, and disposal points.
Yeah, okay, I guess we could do with a little bit more information about that too at a subsequent meeting, if that's okay.
Okay, yes, Councillor.
Okay, moving on then. One of the appendices is from a company called Cllr Recycling. I don't see them on the list of agencies and companies that you use. So could we know a bit more? I mean, they go on quite a lot about oil reprocessing. Is that all they do for Luton, please?
Yes, John, please.
Yeah, so Cllr Recycling are the company that we use to recover or reprocess any of the oils that drop to the HWRC sites. So the used engine oil or the cooking oil that we use. I don't know where you want me to.
Well, we'll take it. So we run step at a time. They explain in this document what happens to the oil, how they process it, and where it ends up, which is all quite encouraging, actually. Perhaps the most discouraging aspect of the process is the fact that in order to get there, it all has to be shipped to Denmark. Is that is there any hope that it can be dealt with without that huge journey?
It's a volume driven business. So if the size of the processing plant required to actually carry out the process completely is offshore based, then that's the way they go with it. If there's enough for market, then they'll try and reprocess as locally as they can. Most of the filtration is done at their site. I've forgotten where it is, I'm afraid. In Hull, yeah, their whole location. But a lot of the motor oil has to go to a more advanced refinery.
Okay, I understand that point. It must be quite difficult to get the required volume to make it actually work economically for them. And if it's not profitable for them, they're not going to do it, are they? So, yeah, I understand that. In the report, it's not the report, the document that they produced, I guess. Any fuels which are not exported to Denmark will be received at our regroup facility in Hull, where they will be used within the production of multi-burn max or QPS. What's multi-burn max or QPS?
They'll just be recycled products that on repurposed products, which will be a trade name. So they could be anything from a lubricant to an oil to burn, really. But we can find out exactly what the product is and get the product data sheets for you.
Yeah, I don't, to be honest, don't think I'm too worried about what the product is. It would just, the word burn starts to me to suggest that maybe some of it ends up being fuel for incineration. Do we know whether that's the case?
I think that's probably highly unlikely. The way the EFWs work, they work on a very careful mix of waste. So but based on calorific value, so it can't be too high or too low, or they don't get the combustion they require to produce the energy.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to Roydon then. A bit concerned to see mixed dry recyclables for export to the Far East. What happens next?
That's one of the last bits of the lead acid battery recycling process for that particular company. So they will, as well as taking lead acid, they have a mixed facility. So they will take a number of products there and then seek markets. So it could be plastic going back in an empty container to China to come back as whatever the latest gadget and widget is. And that's the usual, well, pre-COVID, that used to be the usual way.
Okay, again, I think it might be interesting to get a bit more information at a future meeting about what happens to the stuff when it gets to whereabouts does it go in the Far East, and what do they do with it when they get it?
Yes, we can get you that information, Chair.
Okay, I'm nearly finished. But what exactly do you mean by the term non-compliant waste, please?
Non-compliant waste is usually waste that doesn't fit under the permit for the facility. So it could be anything from residual waste for a recycling facility. Each facility will have a permit for operation and environment, and that will list exactly what materials they can take or not take. So you have to make a declaration to the Environment Agency if you receive non-compliant waste from any of your clients and customers. So quite often things like a bit of asbestos or a bit of hazardous waste is inadvertently taken in. They'll declare that to the Environment Agency on part of their regular returns. Then they'll have to ensure that it's disposed of in the correct manner, and also feedback their paperwork should take them back to which client has delivered the non-compliant waste.
Okay, according to the Environment Agency's pollution inventory, which I haven't read, but I had quoted at me, in 2019, the Greatmore incinerator released more than 8,700 kilograms of particulate matter. Where did this particulate matter go? And I note that there hasn't been much, or if any, monitoring for the last couple of years because of COVID and other issues, but it's about to restart. So, yeah, where did this particulate matter go? Was it released into the atmosphere?
We'll ask the FCC operator of the site. And
sorry, I was just making sure I got the notes down correctly to present it to Greatmore tomorrow. Again, I will get you an answer for that as soon as they open the office tomorrow.
Yes. Go ahead, Councillor Mead.
Thank you. On the question of monitoring what's coming out of the flue, do you have monitors radiating out from the plant, and what are they trying to pick up? You know, I'm thinking that we've heard horror stories of 10, 20 miles, 30 miles downwind to some plants. They've had an effect on the vegetation and maybe people's health. And I wonder, are you got monitors making sure that that isn't happening with your plant? You know, it seems to me the best place to live is underneath the stack because everything else gets blown downwind.
Again, that's not something I'm qualified to answer on, but I will get you an answer on it.
Final one then from me, and then I promise I'll shut up for a while at least. The same Environment Agency pollution inventory shows that the Greatmore incinerator released 229,000 tonnes of CO2 in 2019. As this data was presumably provided by the operator, can you tell us how the figure for CO2 was derived? How was it measured? And I guess, again, since the latest figure available is 2019, I presume that's because the monitoring ceased and is about to restart. Perhaps you could confirm that as well, please.
Absolutely, I'll get that confirmed.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions? Councillor Wynn?
Yes, please. Just a starting point for me for the moment. The collection neat. I explained at the previous meeting, I get bombarded with things every single week because my son happens to be working in this field in Abu Dhabi. In the case of the collection fleet, I understand the issues about electric and electric on commercial vehicles for that type of work. But there is increasing moves elsewhere in the world to things like green hydrogen and so on. What are we doing?
In terms of that, we're in contact with Derbyshire County Council, who are doing a project with Rolls-Royce about blue and green hydrogen. They are looking to see if they can get a product that they can use directly with a bit of work on their waste and other vehicles in Derbyshire. So that's very much cutting edge, as you mentioned at the previous meeting. And we're also doing some work with the East of England Local Government Association on alternative fuels. We use a slightly better fuel than diesel called gas to liquid on our own fleet. And the contractor FCC also uses it for their waste transfer station machinery. But as you quite rightly say, that will probably be the next big step for heavy goods vehicles and dust carts, rather than things like the small tippers and other vehicles you see going around the town, which are prime for EV. But anything bigger than about 16 tonne, it's a bit of a quandary at the moment because the costs for purchase are somewhere around 3 times the cost. And there's no real confirmation of what their longevity is. Typically, our dust carts last 7 to 10 years, 7 years of good hard life. So we're waiting to see what some of the test authorities, certainly for electric dust carts, but in all probability, hydrogen will be that next big thing, certainly for an urban authority like Luton.
Councillor Mead?
Thank you. That's it. On hydrogen, to my way of understanding it, we get hydrogen from water by cracking it, and we put an awful lot of energy in to not a great deal of gain in energy out in hydrogen. And I think it's why that remains the case. Hydrogen is a bit of a pipe dream as a main source of fuel until we get some sort of catalytic converter where you can get the hydrogen out of the water with a minimum of energy input. It's always going to be just over the horizon, something to look forward to, but it isn't going to be a reality. And putting money into getting cars which will run efficiently on hydrogen before you've got really a good economical supply of hydrogen is, yeah, maybe it's on for the future, but I wouldn't put my money on it at the moment.
Okay, Councillor Bridget.
Thanks, Chair. My question is in relation to the video that we saw earlier, and I noticed that there's mention of ammonia being used, and I think that's used to remove the sulfur dioxide from the flue gas. I also know that ammonia can have quite a high carbon footprint. I think it's manufactured by the Harbour process, which is hydrogen reacting with nitrogen, but the hydrogen I think can often come from petrochemicals. So you might not be able to answer this here, but would it be possible to find out what the carbon footprint is of the ammonia that's used at the facility, please?
Yes, we'll be able to find out that information for you.
Do we have any more questions on the report? No. Okay, back over to Councillor Frank.
Just a couple of other questions that are not answered, and that I'm pretty sure Sean won't be able to answer off the top of his head, but if he could make a note for a future meeting. First of all, the question, incineration is better than landfill because what? I know it's cheaper, it costs less, but there must be more to it than just that. And interested to know the difference between the energy you use to make glass from the broken wine bottles that I put in my box and the energy you use to make glass from the basic raw material, which I believe is sand. So there isn't actually a shortage, although there may be transport issues. So yeah, the energy used, I think, would be interesting.
Right. Okay. Are we moving on to the recommendations? Have we? Okay. Right, so recommendation 1 is that we review and compare the information provided. That's recommendation. Nicola and Sean, do you feel like you have got enough of a steer on future residual waste from this discussion, or do we need to? That is the recommendation.
It's certainly been very informative, but I think with the questions the group of the members are asking, I think it's worthwhile us answering all of those questions so that whatever steer you give us you have all the information.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think everybody is sort of finding you ask one question and it raises two, and it goes on. So
that's what I'm concerned about.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say something there, Sean. Yes, please, Councillor Wynn.
Yeah, I suppose we've had a lot of information, but I can't somehow get to an end point in my mind. Maybe I either haven't given it enough thought, or maybe I'm missing some bits somewhere. I can't really view the film we've got, we've seen. I would put down as a sales pitch, but if I look at that, there are aspects of it that worried me, even in the video we saw. The mixed residual waste, I suppose you'd call it, using the term from earlier, the residual waste that was being picked up by the grabs and pushed in. I understand the issue about getting the mix in a reasonable form to get temperatures and so on, because I'm used to chemical processes. So that's fine. The emissions from the burning process still worry me a bit. I don't feel I've got enough of a handle on what's in the output from that chimney, or what levels of pollutants are in it. Perhaps it would help me if I just think about something local and recent. The proposals to build an incinerator on Noah Luton Road were rejected. What were the grounds for rejecting that? Do you know? Because that might help me to understand a bit more.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure, Councillor Wynn, whether I can answer your question exactly, but as far as I'm aware, they never actually put a planning application forward. I think there was a lot of discussion around that as being a potential site. It's in the green belt, which would have been a considerable policy constraint from a planning perspective.
It didn't go down well with the chalk stream either, did it?
No, and I think probably having explored that further, the people that were proposing it probably decided not to go ahead. But there was a lot of resistance locally to it as well. So it may have been that they were advised by the council that it was unlikely to receive planning permission, but I don't believe a planning application was ever received.
I just wondered if anybody had done any analysis on the, I knew all about the transport issues going to and fro and all that stuff, but I wondered if anybody had done any analysis on the emissions and pollutant control and so on. I just wondered if they got that far, but from what you're saying, no.
I don't know the answer to that. Sorry, apologies. I don't know if they ever published any of that information either.
Could I help, Chair? It's the idea of an incinerator at Lower Luton Road or Lower Harpenden Road, depending on which end you're looking at, was an idea which originated from one person, and it became clear that amongst other people in the council, including certain members, there actually wasn't a terribly large amount of support for the idea, and it was just dropped. It never got, as far as I know, as far as any technical assessments or traffic impact assessments or anything else. I don't actually believe any serious time or money was spent on it, because it became clear fairly early on that there wasn't much support for the idea. If there had been, as far as I can remember, it's just about within the central beds area, So that's where the planning application would have gone. It's quite close to Hertfordshire, so I'm not absolutely sure about that.
Thank you. I didn't want to get tied down too much with that. I just thought as a recent example, it might have given me some better understanding. Okay. Yeah. I guess I need to study a bit more about the emissions from the plants that we've got to see better whether I can understand them. Maybe come back if I don't.
If I could suggest that David has a look at the papers from the February meeting, there are some academics have given their views on those over several pages.
I was just going to say, Chair, that seems to be a thread of questions about energy from waste plants, and I know we've talked a few times and tried to arrange various dates. Maybe this is the opportunity of, say, the next 3 or 4 weeks to get a couple of dates from members when you can do it. It's about an hour to Greatmore and an hour back, and probably a couple of hours for a trip. So either we can find a time that's suitable for the majority of members who can make the visit. We can either organise transport, or you can make your own way there if you've got other things to do. But we can possibly answer a lot of the questions and the more technical questions, as well as seeing the facility, if that's of any interest to members still.
It'd probably be helpful to try to do that before the next meeting. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Right. So, in the recommendations, we've reviewed. Do we feel like we're able to give a steer on future residual waste treatment options then, in terms of the recommendations? Because that is what is the recommendation. It seems like everyone just wants more answers to more questions.
Well, I guess I started off by saying that, effectively saying, Chair, that I'm not. I don't feel that I have a clear enough view on this yet.
No, I don't think any of us has. We've asked questions which we've been promised we will be given the answers to. Understand why the answers aren't instantly available. That's not a problem. And we also, of course, have a counter argument to hear at the next meeting as well.
Yes, we do.
So I personally can't reach any conclusion until I've got quite a lot more information, and I understand that, you know, that's the feeling of Councillor Wynn as well. I guess it's everyone's in the same boat.
Right. Okay, that's fine. Sorry, I was just asking for a clarification. So can we agree to note the recommendations at this meeting and agree them when we've got further clarification that we've requested? Is that agreeable to the committee? Because we have lots of questions to get answers to. Perfect. Okay. So that brings us to so we've done the video, that's coming next week. Dates of future meetings. So you'll see there are dates of future meetings at this in the committee papers. They there is going to be a slight change in that this task and finish group now needs to conclude at the October meeting to fall in line with the contract. So we need to disregard the 2nd November and December dates, and we will have to get all our business done by the October meeting. So please keep the dates from May to October in your diaries. Right. And I think that concludes today's business. Oh, Sue, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. Yeah, there was just, we had some thoughts about some further areas for discussion at some of the future meetings.
Excellent.
We can forward those to members for their view, if that would be helpful to members of this committee.
Yes, please.
Some of which would relate to the contract for the the reletting of the contract in the future. Just to give a little bit more steer, perhaps, on some of the issues that could be discussed. And we can circulate those. I wouldn't expect an answer tonight because members haven't seen them, but we can forward those to members.
If you would, please circulate them. That would be really helpful. Thank you very much, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It
Go ahead, David.
Yes, it may be helpful, Chair, if we have at least a provisional item on the next agenda to see whether people have any reactions to what Sue is suggesting. And obviously she'll be circulating them before the next meeting, I guess.
But just have an item to discuss that at the start of the next meeting. That's fine. We can do that. Can you make sure? Okay. So I think that concludes the business, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you all for attending this evening's meeting.